At least when the first time I knit a stockinette fabric, I thought I was doing something wrong because there was all the curling. Nope, not the fun kind of curling. Behind me right here is my finished garment, the June Blooms Vest by Knit Eco Chic. And I really enjoyed this project. I'm gonna bring it up a little bit closer so you can see it better. And this is all knit in stockinette. What Knit Eco Chic chose to do in order to control the curl in this pattern is to utilize a I-cord cast on and an I-cord bind off. I fully expected that between my I-cord edging and then doing a full pin block, I would totally take care of any curl in this garment. Clearly, however, I'm shooting a video about this garment today because that is not what happened. My bound off edge, the curl totally went away, it was fine. However, up here around this collar, I was still getting quite a bit of curling. So to manage the curl on this collar, I ended up utilizing a Afterthought hemmed edge, and I'm going to show you how you can do that today. So hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, give this video a thumbs up, and learn about a hemmed edge. I'm gonna be honest, I'm gonna admit a snafu to you. I originally planned to do this video where I showed you footage of me doing the applied Afterthought rolled hem to this project, but I had a snafu in shooting my overhead camera. So I'm like, I guess I'll make a swatch that simulates the situation I was in. Now theoretically, I could take my swatch, fold it under, and tack it down, and I would have a hemmed edge and I could control my roll. If I were to do it that way, I would lose length in my project. Usually you don't want to lose the length that you already have in your project. So what we need to do is actually knit a new bit of fabric below the cast on edge that we can then have folded over and then sew down or tack down in some way. And doing that is going to, it almost mimics what happens in double knitting, where you get two layers of fabric against each other and they are evening out the tension against each other, and that is what helps control that curling. And you don't need a lot of extra fabric to do it. You only need to knit like 1 or 2 inches. But before I get into all the details in the process of how I did this, I did an Afterthought hemmed edge. Just a quick reminder that if there's any part of the video that you want to jump to right away, down in the description box, I do have timestamps to different parts of the video. I always hope that you'll watch through the whole video at least one time, because you never know what neat tips or tricks or funny moment might happen. But sometimes you need to get to some information quickly. So I do have timestamps down below. Also down the description, Also down in the description box, you will find a list of materials and resources I think are relevant to today's video. Some of these will have clearly marked affiliate links. So if you utilize any means of support for my channel, whether it's just hitting the subscribe button or leaving me a super thanks or using an affiliate link or buying me a coffee, it is all greatly appreciated. With all that out of the way, let's get into doing our Afterthought hemmed edge. So if you don't know already, I don't like picking up and knitting. It is like one of my lesser favorite things to do in knitting, unless I can use a crochet hook. When I have a crochet hook to pick up and knit, I don't mind it so much. I find it so much easier. So I've got my interchangeable Addy here. I do have a review of my Addy squares if you want to check that out. And I have the Addy interchangeable crochet hook set. This is a supplemental set of crochet hooks. When I do this, let's see, I'm using, my needle was a size 8, 5mm. So I'm gonna use a 4.5 millimeter. I could use the 5mm, but I know when I crochet, I'm a little looser than when I knit, and I want the tension to be about the same as my knitting or even a little tighter. So I'm gonna use the 4.5mm crochet hook. Typically, this is the yarn I use to make my swatch. Typically, I would use the same color of yarn to do my hemmed edge. And in fact, on my project here, I actually mirrored the striping on the hemmed fabric that I did on the back side with the front side so that it would all match up really nicely. However, for today's demonstration, so you can see clearly what's going on, I'm going to use a contrasting color of yarn here. So yeah, on the floor with you, toss it on the floor. So next I need to decide where I'm going to pick up my stitches. On my project, I put a stitch marker here just so that I would remember that this here is my first set of purl bumps that I picked up. These are actually the stitches that I picked up into the I-cord edging. That's not where I'm going to pick up. To figure out where you want to pick up, or where I would want to pick up anyway, is I look where my purl bumps are, all right, with my fabric right side, and then I turn the fabric upside down, and I look at what looks like a purl bump. My fabric is upside down. That's not actually a purl bump. This is the upside down stitches, and that's where I want to pick up into my edge. So if you don't know what the upside down stitch is, I have a whole video about this. It's one of my knitting secrets revealed. And you can understand more of what's going on. But I'm going to pick up into what looks like a purl bump when my fabric is upside down. For this project, I obviously have a I-cord cast on. You don't need an I-cord cast on to do this process. You can do this with any kind of cast on edge that you have. If you're doing something, if your cast on edge is more like a long tail cast on, you can pick up into that very first row of purl bumps that you see on the back of the fabric. You might have to do a little bit of testing out on where you want to pick up your new set of stitches that's going to work for you. I want to start on the very edge of my fabric. So let's see, there's my first purl bump. I should say that's the first upside down purl bump right there. I'm not going to pick up there first though. I'm going to bring it into this edge stitch, all right? So the way I find the edge of my fabric is I find my first upside down purl bump, and then I go to that vertical yarn right next to it. Now that that's picked up, I'm now going to move and I'm going to bring my crochet hook underneath that the upside down purl bump, all right? Yarn over, pull that through. And I'm going to continue doing that across this entire row. You might be asking, why do I want to make sure I pick up in the upside down stitches and not into the actual purl bumps? The reason I'm doing that is because when I knit my stockinette fabric, I'm going to be knitting in the opposite direction of the original fabric that I made, and so that everything looks integrated and as if it were all one piece of fabric. You need to pick up and knit into stitches, the upside down stitches. There it is. So I think I have all my stitches correctly picked up, and I'm all ready to start knitting my hem fabric. I'm going to be knitting another stockinette bit of fabric here, okay? However, I want, when I knit this and I fold the new fabric over and tack it down, I want wrong sides together. So I want all the purl bumps from my new fabric to sit against the purl bumps of my original fabric. And if you look here, you can see that I am looking at the wrong side of the work. So my first row that I'm going to knit will be a purl row, okay? Something else to note, as I do this, because I used a crochet hook to pick up these new stitches, right? Do a pick up and knit. All of my stitches are sitting with the left leg to the back of my needle, and that's because in crochet, when using a crochet hook, I wrap the yarn clockwise. So that all that means is that this first row, I'm gonna purl through my back legs so that my stitches aren't twisted. Now I'm gonna turn my work. And I see when I turn my work that I've got stockinette. From this point, I'm just knitting more stockinette fabric until I have enough new fabric to take care of any curling that's happening. I'm here, and I would say that I've knitted probably 3/4 of an inch of new fabric, right? But this is a small piece, and this is kind of a heavier worsted yarn. And just kind of looking at this, I think this is plenty of fabric. And this is where some judgment call is going to come into play. I would say you need a minimum of an inch of new fabric for your hemmed edge in order to control the curl. 2 inches, I think in a lot of cases, is going to be better. If you're in doubt, knit more. if you've knitted too little fabric and you've gone through and you folded it over and you've done all your sewing and then you look at it and you're like, darn it, I didn't add enough fabric for my hem, that's gonna be a lot harder to undo everything to knit up more fabric. So when in doubt, knit more, but I think in this instance, 1 inch is going to be plenty. How you go about sewing down your fabric is somewhat a matter of personal preference into what your personal favorite techniques are. You can very easily, if you enjoy sewing, treat this like 2 vertical edges and just sew your yarn, matching up the stitch on your needle with a row of purl bumps in the back of your main fabric. What I do to do this is to think about it more as what is called a Finchley graft, which is basically sewing, but it's grafting, and I find that it's just an easier way to do it. And it's a little bit of an extra step because I'm actually going to pick up stitches that I'm going to graft into, but I just really like the results of it. And it makes sure that I'm really matching up my purl bumps to my new stitches that are here on my needle. So that's the process I'm going to show you now. To pick up my stitches, I'm going to use this. This is actually a stitch holder for circular knitting. This is really good for this situation because it's a nice thin needle, and this is gonna do me well for what I have to do next. So I'm going to take my fabric and I'm going to fold it over, and I'm going to see where the stitches, what row of my new stitches matches up with the row of the main fabric. And I think it matches up best here, like right here. So I'll put my thing there, and I'm just gonna mark that right there. That's where I'm going to graft into. And now I'm going to pick up stitches. Now, you might have heard a couple different terms with picking up. There's picking up stitches and there's picking up a knit. What's the difference between them? When you see a direction that says pick up your stitches, that means take the needle and insert it into the stitches, just like this, and you're just picking up the stitches onto the needle, thusly. When directions say pick up and knit, that's what I did down here. You pick up your stitch, but then you immediately wrap a new yarn and pull a new stitch up on your needle. So this, I'm now going to be picking up stitches. So I'm just gonna run my thumb across that row to find my first purl bump, which is here. All right, my first purl bump of that row is right there. But I wanna actually start on the edge stitch, which is right here. So I've inserted into this edge stitch first, and now I'm going to pick up into that purl bump. All right. Something that's really useful to know is when you do these pickups, if you want your stitches to be sitting in the mount that you're used to, with the right leg to the front, you're gonna wanna take your needle and you wanna bring it above the purl bump and then down through it. And that will pick up your stitches so that the right leg is to the front. I don't have a useful mnemonic for that. Pick up my edge stitch, and there we go. All of my stitches are now picked up, okay? I'm gonna tell you right now, this is pretty easy on such a small swatch like this. This was hundreds of stitches when I did the pickup, and picking up all of these stitches was in some ways the most time-consuming part of this process. And as I was doing my pickups, you want to be very careful that you are picking up into each purl bump of a stitch, because ideally what you're going to do is you're going to have an equal number of stitches picked up along the back of your original fabric, the same number of stitches here on your needle that you're going to be grafting to, and you can match 1 to 1. Like, that's the kind of the ideal situation that you have. It's going to avoid a lot of problems. So you want to just make sure you're carefully picking up one stitch and you're not missing stitches. Now, this is going to be pretty straightforward for a sample this small, but there's some things that you want to do when you're doing something bigger, like I did with this vest, that is going to set you up for success. One of them is to create little milestones for yourself along your fabric, using stitch markers to mark out the number of stitches in your new layer of fabric with your original layer of fabric. And the idea then is, as you sew along, you should be hitting those milestones at the same time on both sides of the fabric. And as long as you're doing that, then you know that you're keeping everything nice and even between the layers of the fabric as you sew it down. Because let me tell you, if you screw that up, it's a real pain in the patukas, because you're gonna have to start over. How do I know? Because I screwed it up on this. Here's what my project looked like when I screwed it up, and you can see right here how the fabric got all distorted and cattywampus and looked terrible. I got way off, like way off. Way off. Learn from my mistake and give yourself some milestones. All right, so I'm gonna lay out some markers now between both sides of the fabric. Now this isn't many stitches, so I'm gonna just mark out like every 5 stitches. So there we go. Everything should be matched up now, and that's gonna help set me up for success. Whether you're considering yourself crafting like I'm about to do, or sewing, you're going to have to cut off a length of yarn. Now, for this, it's a small sample. This is gonna be pretty easy. I'm going to need about 3 to 4 times of yarn that is the width of my project. However, I'm gonna warn you right now, if you're doing something as large as this that I did, move that over a little bit. This was, again, hundreds of stitches. You might need multiple lengths of yarn. And my rule of thumb is, when it comes to sewing like this or grafting like this, is I really don't want to deal with a length of yarn that's more than about 2 yards, meaning, and by yarn, measuring it out with my arm. So like, I take the yarn and I'll go 1, and then I'll go 2, and that's about as long of a length that I want to manage. Any longer than that, it just becomes very tedious. For this, I'm not gonna, I know that I'm not gonna have a huge long piece. So I'm just gonna fold my fabric over. So my new fabric is being folded over on top of my original fabric. And then I fold my original fabric back in such a way that I just see the stitches that I'm going to graft into. Now I'm going to treat this like doing a Finchley graft. So I do have a video on how to do a Finchley graft. It's like, it's my new favorite graft. It's very easy to memorize. So here's my back needle, and here's my front needle. To get started, I'm going to take my tapestry needle, which is to the back of the work right now, and bring it through this first stitch on my front needle as if to purl, and then I'll take that stitch I went through off the needle.
Now my tapestry needle is to the front of the work and I need to bring it back through the stitches to the back of the work. So I'm going to take my tapestry needle and put it on the first stitch of my front needle as if to knit, and then I'll put it through the first stitch on my back needle as if to knit, and the last stitch that I went through comes off the needle. So now my working yarn is to the back of the work and I need to bring it back to the front. I do that by taking my tapestry needle and going through the first stitch on my back needle as if to purl, and then through the first stitch on the front needle as if to purl. And then that stitch I just went through comes off the needle. And at this point, I just repeat that process over and over again.
So that is how I am sewing down these fabrics. And this is a really kind of, I think, straightforward way of going about and sewing this down in a way that keeps everything nice and even. And we're about to get our first test of my milestones. And you can see here, both my stitch markers are off and the stitches are right next to each other, right? Those stitch markers are right across from each other. So I know I've kept all of my stitches even. I'm still going 1 to 1 between the two sides of the fabric. If they're off from one another, something has gone askew. And we want to avoid askew.
Regardless of how you tack down your new fabric for this hemmed edge, you want to make sure that you keep your sewing or grafting a little bit loose. You can see here on the fabric that there's a little bit of a line happening, and that's because my graft is pulling down on those purl stitches. I think this tension is fine, but to make sure it doesn't get overly tight, just want to make sure you keep your graft or your sewing loose.
This is one of those things that comes down to just sort of a feel and a judgment call and looking at it and going, am I satisfied with how that's looking? You have to trust yourself a bit. That's something with knitting sometimes. Crafting in general is you really have to learn to sort of trust your instincts and go, yeah, I'm happy with that. Yeah, I'm satisfied. Coming up here to the edge. There we go, and I'm going to come through this last stitch, then this last stitch. I'm going to take them both off, and that's all sewed down. And there we go, my hemmed stitch is done. And you can see that it is not curling. That is laying nice and flat now. And I would say this would be such a great swatch if not for the fact that I did do a great job binding off and my tension is off on top. I'm not perfect. But a couple of things that I want to note about this swatch and my hem edge. One is you will see that I have a very clear line right there where my stitches are a little bit tighter, just a little bit tighter, and I've clearly sewn something down. This is just an aspect that can happen with a hemmed edge like this, and for me, this is perfectly acceptable.
However, notice that when I stretch this, everything stretches very nicely together. It's all very even.
And that is because I, have grafted this, so the stitches back here are basically knit stitches and everything's moving together nicely. But something to note is with this hemmed edge, it is very much like having a DK, a double knit project, meaning and my edges are open. Whoop, 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 whoop. Open edges, open edges. Open edges like this, it is totally up to you on how you want to handle it. You can choose to leave those edges open. Perfectly acceptable choice. Me personally, I would choose to use a mattress seam and close those shut. On this side of my project, obviously I got a lot of tails. I can use one of my tails to sew up that edge. This side, I'd have to bring in a little bit of length of yarn to sew those closed. But the really nice thing about this and having this like doubled up fabric is I can actually bury all of these ends in between the layers of the hem. So that's a really nice thing. It's very much like weaving in ends. Actually, it's exactly the same thing that you can do when you're weaving in ends with a double knit project. Now, of course, what I have done here is an afterthought hemmed edge, meaning this is what I did after I finished the project and I went, oh my goodness, I've got a problem. Houston, we have a problem. If I were going to do my June Blooms vest project again, I would probably, knowing what I know now, not start with an I-cord cast on, and I would actually do a hemmed edge cast on. You can do a hemmed edge, you can plan for that and do it as a forethought. And actually the process for doing that is in a lot of ways way more straightforward than what I have shown you here today. If you are interested in me doing a video on a forethought hemmed project to start off your knitting, a sweater or what have you, let me know down in the comments below. I would be thrilled to do that video for you. I hope that you enjoyed today's video. You got some great information out of it. If so, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with your other knitting friends. Liking videos, sharing videos, commenting on videos are all great ways to help grow this community and let YouTube know that this is a space that you guys enjoy being in. If you have not already, please make sure that you are subscribed and you click the notification bell. Clicking the notification bell, if you have your notifications turned on, will let you know whenever I upload a new video or start a live stream. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you have a wonderful day, evening, weekend, weeknight, whenever you may be watching me. And as always, happy health and happy making. Bye. Rolling with the knitting. Roll. Oh, yeah, no, that's normal. Bird, squirrel, wah! So, guess what it's time for? Swish time! Oh no, I didn't turn on my overhead, shit. And you're folding it under and you're sewing the edge of the fabric against the back. Blah. Looking at it now, based on kind of